They came from a void between stars, these beings who called themselves the Karvith Dominion. For 3,000 years, they had swept across 17 galaxies, consuming every sapient species they encountered. Their massive bioships moved like living nightmares through space, hunting with the patience of predators who had never known failure. The Karvith were perfect killers, standing 12 feet tall with obsidian carapaces that could deflect plasma fire. They possessed 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, compound eyes that saw across multiple spectrums, and mandibles that could crush titanium. Their society was built around a simple philosophy. The strong devoured the weak, and they were the strongest beings in the universe. They had conquered the silicon-based crystalline empire in mere months. The energy beings of the luminous collective lasted only weeks. The hive-minded swarm worlds fell in days. Each victory proved their superiority. Each conquered species added to their understanding of warfare and biology. But then their scouts found a small yellow star with a blue-green world orbiting in the habitable zone. The initial scans showed a young species that had barely begun to explore their own solar system. Bipedal mammals that called themselves humans. Physically weak, individually fragile, with no natural weapons or armor. Their technology was primitive, their ships laughably slow, their weapons crude projectile-based systems. The Karvith war prince Vex then looked at the data with what passed for amusement among his kind. These humans wouldn't even provide good sport. Perhaps they would serve as livestock, or maybe just another footnote in the Dominion's catalog of extinct species. As the great hunting fleets moved toward Earth, the galaxy held its breath. The few surviving races whispered prayers for the humans, knowing that when this massacre was complete, there would be no one left to stand against the Karvith Dominion. They had no idea they were about to witness the birth of a legend that would echo through the cosmos for millennia to come. Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the holographic display in the United Earth Defense Command's war room, watching the red dots that represented the approaching alien fleet. Each dot was a ship larger than anything humanity had ever built, and there were over 3,000 of them moving steadily toward Earth. The silence in the room was deafening. General Martinez cleared his throat. "Admiral, our best estimates put their arrival at Earth in 72 hours. We have 47 operational ships, most of them barely space-worthy. Our weapons are kinetic projectiles and basic missiles. Against their bioarmor, we might as well be throwing rocks." Sarah nodded grimly. The Karvith had made no attempt to hide their approach. In fact, they had broadcast their intentions on every frequency humanity could receive. The message was simple and brutal: surrender or be consumed. They gave detailed descriptions of the 17 civilizations they had already devoured, complete with recordings of the final moments of each species. The psychological warfare was as effective as it was cruel. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the head of xenobiology studies, pulled up another display. "Based on the biological samples they sent us, the Karvith are everything they claim to be. Perfect predators. Their carapaces can withstand temperatures that would melt our ships. Their reaction times are 5 times faster than human average. They don't sleep, they barely need to eat, and they can survive in vacuum for hours." "Then, why are we even discussing this?" asked Colonel Roberts, his voice heavy with despair. "We should be evacuating who we can to the outer colonies." Sarah turned to face the room full of military leaders, scientists, and politicians. "Because running isn't who we are. Dr. Reeves, what do we know about their psychology?" Dr. Ellen Reeves stepped forward, her tablet displaying behavioral analyses. "They're hunters, pure and simple. Every aspect of their society revolves around the hunt, the kill, the consumption of their prey. They view warfare as an art form, preferring to toy with their victims before the final strike. They've never encountered a species that fought back effectively." "Never?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "That's just it, Admiral. Every species they've encountered has either surrendered immediately or tried to flee. The few that fought back used conventional military tactics, formations, predictable strategies. The Karvith adapted quickly and overwhelmed them through superior physical capabilities. Sarah walked to the window, overlooking the bustling military base below. Soldiers were running drills, engineers were working on weapon modifications, and families were saying goodbyes that might be final. Dr. Reeves, what makes humans different? I'm sorry, Admiral, I don't understand. What makes humans different from every other species the Carvith have conquered? Dr. Reeves consulted her notes. Well, we're significantly more fragile than most sapient species. We have shorter lifespans, weaker immune systems, no natural weapons or armor. If anything, we should be easier prey. That's not what I meant. Sarah turned back to the group. General Martinez, tell me about the Battle of Stalingrad. The general looked confused but answered. World War II. The Germans had superior equipment, training, and numbers. The Soviets held the city through brutal urban warfare, using every building, every room as a fortress. They turned the enemy's advantages against them. Dr. Tanaka, tell me about the Emu War. The scientist blinked in surprise. The what? Oh, you mean when Australia tried to cull the emu population with machine guns? The birds won. They were too fast, too scattered, too adaptable for conventional military tactics to work. Exactly. Colonel Roberts, what's the most successful military strategy in human history? Guerrilla warfare, I suppose. Small, mobile forces using hit-and-run tactics, blending with the local population, striking where and when the enemy least expects it. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Gentlemen, ladies, we're approaching this all wrong. We're trying to fight the Carvith like a traditional military force, ship to ship, strength against strength. But that's not how humans fight. That's not how we've ever fought when we're outmatched. She gestured to the display, showing Earth. This is our advantage. Not our technology, not our weapons. This. She pointed to the blue-green marble floating in space. The Carvith are used to space battles, clean victories, overwhelming force. They've never had to deal with a planetary defense where every human is a potential combatant, where every building is a fortress, where the very environment becomes a weapon. General Martinez leaned forward. Admiral, are you suggesting we let them land? I'm suggesting we make them think they've already won. Dr. Reeves, the Carvith psychology report mentioned they prefer live prey, correct? Yes, they seem to enjoy the terror and desperation of their victims. It's part of their feeding process, both literally and psychologically. Perfect. We're going to give them exactly what they expect. A broken, terrified species begging for mercy. And when they come down to play with their food, Sarah's smile turned predatory. They'll learn why humans are the only species on Earth that hunts for sport. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Dr. Tanaka spoke up. Admiral, this is incredibly risky. If we miscalculate, if they decide to just orbital bombard us instead of landing, then we die fighting instead of running. But I don't think they will. Everything we know about them suggests they need the personal satisfaction of the hunt. They want to see us break, to hear us scream. They want trophies. Sarah's voice hardened. We're going to give them a hunt they'll never forget. Over the next 60 hours, Earth transformed. Not into a fortress, but into something far more dangerous. Military units dispersed into small cells. Weapons caches were hidden in schools, hospitals, and civilian buildings. The global communications network was hardened and compartmentalized. Most importantly, every human on the planet received the same message. When the aliens land, appear weak, appear broken, appear helpless. And then wait for the signal. The Carvith fleet arrived exactly on schedule, their massive bioships blotting out the sun over major cities. As expected, they sent down scouts first, testing human responses. Earth's orbital defenses put up a token resistance, just enough to seem genuine before being overwhelmed. The few human ships that engaged were easily destroyed, their crews broadcasting appropriately terrified final messages. War Prince Vex then watched from his flagship as human military installations surrendered without firing a shot. Cities went dark as power grids shut down. The primitive electromagnetic signals that passed for human communication fell silent. It was exactly what he had expected from such a weak species. "My prince," his second hunter reported, "the prey has ceased all resistance. Shall we begin the harvest?" Vexthan's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "No, we hunt. Take 100 hunting pods. We will savor this victory properly. The terror of the prey will make the flesh all the sweeter." The Karvith hunting parties descended on the major cities like locusts. They came in small groups, just as Sarah had hoped, seeking personal glory and individual trophies rather than efficient extermination. They spread out through the seemingly empty urban landscapes, hunting for terrified survivors to torment. In New York, a hunting party of 12 Karvith moved through Times Square, their sensors detecting human life signs in the surrounding buildings. They split up to flush out their prey, expecting to find cowering civilians. Instead, they found carefully positioned explosives that brought down 2 city blocks, burying half the hunting party under tons of rubble. The survivors faced sniper fire from dozens of buildings, each shot fired from a different location by shooters who knew every inch of their city. In London, the Karvith found the underground tunnels filled with humans, just as their sensors had indicated. But the humans weren't hiding. They were waiting. As the aliens descended into the tunnels, they discovered that every station had been turned into a kill zone. Electricity arced through the metal rails, burning through their bioarmor. Explosive charges collapsed tunnels, trapping them in sections where hidden humans picked them off one by one. In Tokyo, the Karvith hunters thought they had cornered a group of terrified civilians in a high-rise building. The humans screamed and ran, just as expected, fleeing to the upper floors. The aliens followed, savoring the hunt. They didn't realize until it was too late that the building had been rigged to collapse inward, trapping them in a maze of twisted metal and concrete where their size became a disadvantage. War Prince Vex then received the first distress calls 3 hours after the hunt began. At first, he attributed the losses to overconfidence and poor tactics. But as more hunting parties went silent, as more reports came in of coordinated ambushes and impossible escapes, his certainty began to waver. "Second hunter," he called to his subordinate, "what are the losses?" The report was sobering. "We have lost contact with 47 hunting parties. Those that have reported back describe coordinated attacks by organized resistance cells. The humans appear to be using the urban environment as a weapon." Vexton's compound eyes narrowed. "Impossible." Our intelligence was clear. These mammals have no military discipline, no effective weapons, no coordination. "My prince, perhaps we should withdraw the hunting parties and begin orbital bombardment." For a moment, Vexton considered it. But the thought of retreating from such inferior prey was unbearable. The Dominion had never failed to complete a hunt, had never been forced to retreat from mammals that should have been easy victims. "No, deploy the full hunting force. Every warrior on every ship. We will show these humans what it means to be prey." As thousands of Karvith warriors descended on Earth cities, Admiral Sarah Chun smiled grimly from her command bunker hidden deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The aliens had taken the bait. Now came the real test of whether humanity's greatest strength could overcome the galaxy's apex predators. "All units," she broadcast on the encrypted network, "Phase 2 is now active. Show them what humans do when we're cornered. Show them why we're the species that conquered our own world by being too stubborn to know when we were beaten." Across the globe, the real war was about to begin. The second wave of Karvith warriors descended on Earth expecting an easy massacre. Instead, they found themselves trapped in the deadliest game of hide and seek in galactic history. War Prince Vexthan's tactical displays showed red warning indicators across every major population center on the planet. His perfect hunters, the apex predators of 17 galaxies, were being systematically eliminated by creatures they could crush with their bare hands. In the ruins of Berlin, Squad Hunter Carvex led 20 warriors through what had once been a shopping district. Their biosensors detected hundreds of human life signs in the surrounding buildings, but every time they moved to investigate, the signals vanished. The humans were moving through passages the aliens couldn't detect, using maintenance tunnels, sewer systems, and hidden routes that turned the cityscape into a three-dimensional maze. "Contact front," one of his warriors called out, pointing toward a group of humans running across an intersection. The Karvith charged after them, their powerful legs covering the distance in seconds. But as they rounded the corner, the street exploded beneath them. The humans had led them over a carefully placed series of gas line ruptures, turning the very infrastructure of the city into a weapon. Carvex pulled himself from the rubble, his bioarmor cracked, but intact. Three of his warriors weren't so lucky. As he called for medical support, sniper fire erupted from a dozen different buildings. Each shot was precisely aimed at the gaps in their armor, targeting joints and sensor arrays. When his warriors tried to return fire, the humans were already gone, having escaped through pre-planned routes. The worst part wasn't the casualties. It was the fear. For the first time in Karvith history, the hunters were afraid of their prey. On the other side of the world, in what remained of Mumbai, pack leader Thexani was experiencing her own nightmare. Her hunting pack had been reduced from 50 warriors to 12 in less than 6 hours. The humans here fought differently than those in other cities. They used the chaos and crowds to their advantage, disappearing into masses of seemingly terrified civilians only to emerge behind Karvith forces with improvised weapons that somehow penetrated their bioarmor. "Pack leader," her second called out. "Multiple human signatures in the market district ahead." Thexani studied her scanner readings. The life signs were clustered in what appeared to be a traditional marketplace, perfect for herding prey. Advance in formation, standard hunting pattern. But as they moved into the market, the Karvith discovered that the terrified civilians were anything but helpless. Hidden among the vendors and shoppers were soldiers who had discarded their uniforms, appearing identical to non-combatants until the moment they struck. Cooking oil became napalm, spice vendors produced military-grade explosives, and food carts transformed into mobile weapons platforms. The humans had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. The Karvith couldn't distinguish between combatants and civilians because there was no distinction. Every human was a potential threat, every interaction a possible trap. In the frozen wasteland of what had been Moscow, war leader Jexmore faced a different kind of hell. The humans here had embraced the winter, using the cold itself as a weapon. They moved like ghosts through the snow, appearing from white-painted positions to strike at Karvith patrols before vanishing again. The aliens' bioarmor, designed for the warm environments they preferred, struggled in the sub-zero temperatures. Their movements became sluggish, their reactions slowed, while the humans seemed to thrive in conditions that should have been hostile to their mammalian biology. War leader, his communications officer, reported, "We've lost contact with 7 more patrols. The humans appear to be using the weather against us." Jexmore watched as another group of his warriors disappeared into a blizzard that had appeared seemingly from nowhere. He didn't know that human weather control satellites, supposedly destroyed in the initial bombardment, were still operational and being used to create localized storm systems. The humans weren't just adapting to their environment, they were weaponizing it. Back on the Karvith flagship, War Prince Vex then stared at casualty reports that defied everything he understood about warfare. In 18 hours of combat, his forces had lost nearly 3,000 warriors, not to superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but to an enemy that refused to fight fairly. "My prince," his chief strategist approached cautiously. "Perhaps it is time to reconsider our tactics. These humans are not behaving like any prey species we have encountered. They are mammals." Vex then roared, his mandibles clicking in fury. "Weak, soft, pathetic creatures. How are they killing my warriors?" The strategist pulled up tactical data from across the planet. "They do not fight like a military force, my prince. They fight like us." "Explain." "They hunt in packs, but their packs are small and mobile. They use stealth, patience, and intimate knowledge of their territory. They set traps, they stalk their prey, they strike when their target is vulnerable and isolated. They are hunting us the same way we hunt other species." Vex then fell silent, considering this. The Carveth had conquered 17 galaxies by being the ultimate predators, but they had never faced prey that could adapt their own tactics. Every other species had tried to fight them with conventional military strategies, meeting force with force. The humans were doing something unprecedented. They were out hunting the hunters. On Earth, the Resistance was beginning to realize just how effective their strategy was becoming. In Admiral Chen's command bunker, reports flowed in from every continent showing similar patterns. Small human teams were eliminating much larger Carveth forces through superior tactics, environmental advantages, and sheer bloody-minded determination. Admiral Colonel Roberts reported, "Sydney team has just confirmed elimination of another hunting pack. That brings our total to over 400 confirmed Carveth kills since the ground assault began." Dr. Reeves looked up from her analysis station. "Admiral, we're seeing psychological changes in their behavior patterns. Carveth forces are becoming more cautious, more defensive. They're starting to exhibit what can only be described as paranoid behavior." Sarah Chun allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. "Good. Fear is a weapon too." Dr. Tanaka, what's our assessment of their physical capabilities under stress? "Fascinating data, Admiral. Their bioarmor seems to have limitations we didn't expect. Extended stress is causing microfractures in their carapaces. Their enhanced reflexes are becoming erratic when they're constantly watching for ambushes. Most importantly, their pack coordination is breaking down as they lose confidence in their tactical superiority." "They're learning to fear us," Sarah murmured. "The question is, how will they respond to that fear?" The answer came 6 hours later when Carveth forces across the globe began withdrawing from urban areas, consolidating into larger groups, and adopting defensive positions. For the first time in their species' history, the Carveth were retreating from a prey species. But War Prince vexed and was not ready to admit defeat. In his command chamber, surrounded by his remaining war leaders, he devised a new strategy. If the humans wanted to hide in their cities, he would bring the cities down around them. "Prepare the biobombs," he commanded. "We will turn their own atmosphere against them. Release the plague spores into every major population center. Let them hunt us while they're dying from within." It was a weapon the Carveth had never needed to use before, but it had proven effective against the Crystalline Empire when conventional tactics failed. Bioengineered pathogens that would rewrite human DNA, turning their own bodies into weapons against their nervous systems. The deployment began at dawn, massive spore clouds descending on cities across the globe. Within hours, the first reports of infection began coming in. Humans collapsing in the streets, convulsing as their own biology turned against them. The Carveth watched from orbit, finally, confident that their technological superiority would end this embarrassing resistance. But as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. The infection rates began slowing, then stopping entirely. Medical facilities across the globe reported successful treatments, and new cases dropped to zero in areas that should have been completely overwhelmed. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood in the medical bay of the command bunker, staring at test results that should have been impossible. "Admiral, you need to see this." Sarah joined her at the analysis station. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" "The Carveth bioweapon. It's designed to rewrite human DNA by attacking our nervous system through our bloodstream. It should have been 100% fatal within hours of exposure." "Should have been." Dr. Tanaka smiled grimly. "They made one critical error. They based their weapon on the biological samples they received during their initial demands for surrender. Samples that were 60 years out of date." "I don't understand." "Admiral, the Carveth have been isolated in space for so long that their understanding of biological warfare is based on static models. They don't account for evolution, for adaptation, for the changes that species undergo over time. Humans have spent the last century dealing with increasingly sophisticated biological weapons, bioterrorism, engineered viruses, and genetic warfare. Our immune systems have been adapting, our medical technology has been advancing." Sarah began to understand. "You're saying we've been accidentally preparing for this kind of attack for decades?" "Not accidentally, Admiral. Naturally. Humans adaptado. It's what we do. Every generation of our species becomes more resistant to biological attacks because we keep surviving them. The Carveth weapon is sophisticated, but it's designed for humans as they existed decades ago, not as we are now. Reports from around the globe confirm the analysis. Human casualties from the bioweapon were significant, but not catastrophic. Medical teams were already developing treatments based on existing protocols for genetic warfare. More importantly, human morale was soaring. The aliens' ultimate weapon had failed. War Prince Vex then received the reports in stunned silence. His bioweapons, the terror that had broken the will of a dozen species, had been neutralized by a prey species that somehow adapted in real time to threats they had never encountered before. My prince, his second hunter, approached cautiously. Perhaps it is time to consider withdrawal. These humans are not like other prey. Vex then turned his compound eyes toward the blue-green world below. For 3,000 years, the Carveth had been the ultimate predators. They had never failed to complete a hunt, never been forced to retreat. The idea that they could be defeated by such seemingly weak creatures was incomprehensible. But, incomprehensible or not, it was happening. His forces were reduced to less than half their original strength. His warriors were demoralized and afraid. His ultimate weapons had proven ineffective, and somewhere on the surface of that world, the humans were planning their next move. On Earth, Admiral Chun was doing exactly that. The Carveth had revealed their limitations, shown that they could be beaten. Now, it was time to take the offensive. All units, she broadcast to resistance cells across the globe. Phase 3 is now active. The hunters are about to become the hunted. Phase 3 began at midnight GMT with the most audacious military operation in human history. While the Carveth licked their wounds in defensive positions, believing they had at least contained the human resistance, Admiral Chin's master plan unfolded across the globe. The aliens were about to learn that humans had one more advantage they hadn't considered: the ability to think so far outside conventional tactics that even the most experienced predators couldn't anticipate their moves. Captain Maria Santos adjusted her oxygen mask as she rappelled down the exterior of the Willis Tower in Chicago. Around her, 19 other members of the urban assault team descended through the pre-dawn darkness, their black suits making them nearly invisible against the building's dark facade. Below them, a Carveth command post had been established in what used to be the lobby of the skyscraper. The aliens had chosen the location for its defensive advantages: clear sight lines in all directions, multiple escape routes, and elevated positions for their heavy weapons. What they hadn't anticipated was that humans could approach from directly above, using equipment and techniques that the Carveth's three-dimensional tactical thinking didn't account for. 30 seconds to contact, Maria whispered into her comm unit. Around the city, 17 other teams were conducting simultaneous assaults on Carveth positions. The aliens expected ground-level attacks, urban warfare through streets and buildings. They weren't prepared for humans who could fly. The assault team crashed through the building's windows in a coordinated strike that caught the Carveth completely off guard. Flashbang grenades designed to overwhelm their compound eyes turned their enhanced senses against them. High-frequency sonic weapons exploited their sensitive hearing. Within minutes, the most defensible position in Chicago was in human hands. But the real surprise wasn't the success of the assault. It was what the humans did next. Instead of holding the position or retreating, they began broadcasting Carveth communication codes they had captured during the attack. Across the city, alien forces received false orders, contradictory commands, and misinformation that sent them rushing toward empty buildings while the real human forces struck elsewhere. "Command, this is Santos," Maria reported as her team prepared for extraction. "Package secured. The aliens' communication network is now completely compromised." The Carveth had never faced an enemy that could so quickly adapt and exploit their own systems against them. Their biotechnology, evolved over millennia, was powerful but inflexible. Human technology, crude by comparison, was infinitely more adaptable. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal tracker Tommy Namatjira was teaching a group of International Special Forces soldiers how to hunt Karvith patrols using techniques that were 50,000 years old. The aliens' advanced sensors could detect heat signatures, electromagnetic emissions, and chemical traces. But they couldn't track prey that moved like the land itself, reading signs in the earth and sky that technology couldn't measure. The big fellas think like machines, Tommy explained to the mixed group of Navy SEALs, British SAS, and Russian Spetsnaz soldiers. They follow patterns, use logic. But the land doesn't follow logic. The land just is. You want to hunt them, you got to think like the land. The hunting party had been tracking a Karvith reconnaissance team for 3 days, following signs that the aliens couldn't even detect. Broken twigs that told stories, disturbed earth that revealed direction, and timing, changes in animal behavior that indicated the passage of predators. The soldiers watched in amazement as Tommy read the landscape like a book written in a language older than civilization. "They're close," he whispered, pointing toward a rocky outcropping 2 kilometers away. "Been holed up there for 6 hours. Getting nervous. Their leader keeps sending scouts out to check the perimeter." Lieutenant Commander Jackson of the SEALs studied the target area through his scope. "I don't see anything." "How can you be sure?" Tommy smiled. "Birds. See how the crows are acting? They know something's wrong. And the wind's carrying scent the wrong way. Plus, there's a dust cloud about 20 minutes old heading away from those rocks. Scout coming back." The ambush that followed was a masterclass in human adaptability. While the Karvith scanned for technological threats, the humans attacked using Stone Age tactics combined with modern weapons. Spears tipped with shaped charges, arrows that delivered electromagnetic pulse devices, slings that launched smart grenades. The aliens never saw them coming. More importantly, the human forces captured the reconnaissance team alive. Under interrogation, they revealed intelligence about Karvith fleet dispositions, tactical doctrines, and, most critically, the location of War Prince Vexton's flagship. On the other side of the world, Dr. Yuki Tanaka was making an even more significant discovery in the ruins of Tokyo. Working with a team of xenobiologists, she had been studying Karvith corpses recovered from various battlefields. What she found changed the entire strategic picture. "Admiral," she reported via secure quantum link, "we've been fundamentally wrong about Karvith biology. They're not as perfect as they appear." From her bunker command center, Admiral Chun listened intently. "Explain, Doctor." "Their bioarmor, their enhanced reflexes, their physical capabilities, they're all the result of genetic modification, not natural evolution. The Karvith have been engineering themselves for so long that they've lost their biological diversity. Every individual is essentially identical. The implications hit Chin immediately. They have no genetic variation to draw upon. No adaptation mechanisms. Exactly. Humans evolved through constant environmental pressure, genetic diversity, and adaptation to changing conditions. We're biological Swiss Army knives, versatile, resilient, capable of functioning in multiple environments. The Karvith are biological precision instruments, extremely effective in their designed role, but brittle when faced with unexpected conditions. Dr. Tanaka's analysis was confirmed by field reports from around the globe. Karvith forces were struggling to adapt to changing human tactics. When the humans switched strategies, the aliens couldn't compensate. Their 3,000 years of victory had made them tactically rigid, unable to evolve their approach when faced with unprecedented challenges. But the most devastating blow to Karvith morale came from an unexpected source. In the depths of the Amazon rainforest, an indigenous shaman named Paulo Yakaruna was conducting a ritual that would have seemed like fantasy to most of the world. But to the Karvith biosensors monitoring human activity, it registered as something far more terrifying. Paulo had spent his life learning to communicate with the forest, understanding the intricate web of connections between all living things. When the aliens landed, he realized that their bioships, despite their advanced technology, were still fundamentally biological entities. And biological entities could be influenced by those who understood the deeper patterns of life. Using techniques passed down through generations of plant medicine practitioners, Paolo began reaching out to the Carveth bioships themselves, not to their technological systems, but to their living components. He spoke to them in the chemical language of pheromones and neurotransmitters, in the electrical patterns of synaptic activity, in the quantum resonance of cellular communication. To the Carveth crew aboard the bioship Devourer of Worlds, it began as a minor malfunction. Navigation systems became sluggish. Life support fluctuations caused minor discomfort. Weapons targeting systems showed microscopic errors that gradually became more pronounced. But within hours, the problems escalated. The ship's bioneural network began experiencing what could only be described as confusion. Command pathways became entangled. The ship started responding to Carveth orders with delays, or sometimes not at all. Most disturbing of all, some crew members reported that they could hear whispers in their sleep, voices speaking in languages they didn't recognize but somehow understood. War Prince Vex then received the report with growing alarm. "What do you mean? The ship is resisting commands." "My prince," the ship's biotechnician replied nervously. "The neural network appears to be developing independent responses. It's as if the ship is thinking for itself." Similar reports came in from 6 other bioships in the fleet. The Carveth, who had never encountered any form of spiritual or shamanic practice, had no framework for understanding what was happening. Their purely materialistic worldview couldn't comprehend that consciousness might exist in forms they hadn't engineered or controlled. In response to the growing chaos among their forces, the Carveth made their most desperate decision yet. War Prince Vex then authorized the deployment of planet-killer weapons, massive biomechanical devices designed to consume entire worlds from the inside out. If they couldn't conquer Earth conventionally, they would devour it completely. The planet-killers descended toward Earth's surface like living meteors, each one capable of converting an entire continent into biomass that could be processed by the Carveth fleet. As they entered the atmosphere, human forces around the globe watched in horror, knowing that conventional weapons would be useless against technology designed to consume worlds. But humans had learned something about the Carveth that the aliens themselves had forgotten. For all their genetic perfection and technological superiority, they had never learned to truly cooperate. Every Carveth was genetically programmed for individual glory, for personal success in the hunt. They were apex predators, but they weren't pack hunters in the truest sense. Humans, on the other hand, had evolved as social creatures. Their greatest strength had never been individual capability, but collective action. When faced with extinction, humans didn't compete for survival. They collaborated for it. Admiral Chen's final gambit required coordination on a scale that would have been impossible for any other species. Every remaining human military unit, resistance cell, and civilian group had to work together with perfect timing and absolute trust. The plan was so audacious that even Chen herself wasn't certain it would work. "All units, all frequencies," she broadcast to the entire planet. "This is Admiral Chen. Execute Operation Prometheus. Show them what happens when 7 billion humans decide to hunt the same prey." Across the globe, the counterattack began, not as separate actions by isolated groups, but as a single coordinated response by an entire species. The Carveth were about to learn that they had never faced a true apex predator. They had been hunting individuals, teams, even armies. Now, they were about to face something unprecedented in their experience, an entire world fighting as one organism. The planet killers were falling toward Earth, but for the first time since the invasion began, the Carveth fleet was beginning to feel something they had never experienced before. They were beginning to understand what it felt like to be prey. Operation Prometheus unfolded across Earth like a symphony of coordinated destruction, each movement precisely timed to create a crescendo that would echo through the cosmos for millennia. The Carveth planet killers descended through the atmosphere, massive biomechanical monstrosities designed to convert entire continents into digestible biomass. But as they fell toward their targets, they encountered something no Carveth strategist had ever conceived of, an entire planet fighting back as a single organism. In Kazakhstan, Dr. Alexei Volkov initiated the first phase of the operation. The massive Baikonur Cosmodrome had been secretly converted into the largest railgun in human history. Its launch rails extended and modified to fire projectiles at previously impossible velocities. But the projectiles weren't conventional weapons. They were human volunteers. Prometheus Team Alpha, your go for launch, Dr. Volkov announced over the comm system. In the launch chamber, 12 men and women lay in specially designed acceleration pods, each one equipped with a personal arsenal that represented the pinnacle of human military technology. They had volunteered for a mission with no possibility of survival and no guarantee of success. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, formerly of the Korean Special Forces, checked her equipment one final time. Her pod contained enough explosives to level a city block, a neural interface system reverse-engineered from captured Karvith technology, and a quantum communicator that would allow her to coordinate with other teams, even inside a planet killer's bioarmor. All teams, this is Alpha Leader, she transmitted as the railgun's electromagnetic fields began building power. Remember, we're not trying to destroy these things from the outside. We're going to kill them from within, like antibodies in a bloodstream. The launch was simultaneous across 6 continents. Railguns, mass drivers, and chemical rockets hurled human strike teams directly at the descending planet killers. The Karvith defensive systems, designed to intercept large military spacecraft, couldn't track dozens of human-sized projectiles moving at hypersonic speeds. Lieutenant Kim's pod penetrated the bioarmor of planet killer designation Omega 7 at over 8 kilometers per second. The impact designed to breach the creature's hide while keeping its human cargo alive. As she activated her emergency systems and began cutting her way out of the pod, she found herself inside what could only be described as the digestive system of a living nightmare. The interior of the planet killer was a maze of biological passages, each one pulsing with the creature's heartbeat, each surface designed to break down and absorb organic matter. But humans had encountered hostile biological environments before. Every cave diver, every deep-sea explorer, every astronaut had prepared for situations where the environment itself was the enemy. Alpha Team, sound off, Kim transmitted as she activated her bioprotection systems. Alpha 2, inside and mobile. This thing's anatomy is incredibly complex, but I'm reading massive neural clusters about 2 kilometers deeper. Alpha 3, I've found what looks like a respiratory system. Deploying chemical weapons now. Alpha 6, I'm at what appears to be a major circulatory junction. Preparing to introduce viral agents. The Karvith had designed their planet killers to be invulnerable to external attack, but they had never considered the possibility of internal sabotage. The creature's own immune systems couldn't distinguish between the human invaders and their own cellular components once the humans deployed Karvith-derived biological camouflage. But the real genius of Operation Prometheus wasn't the direct assault on the planet killers. It was the simultaneous attack on the Karvith fleet itself, launched from the most unexpected direction possible, from below. Admiral Chin's analysis of Karvith psychology had revealed a critical weakness. As apex predators, they always attacked from positions of strength, always struck from above, always maintained tactical superiority. Their entire worldview was based on being the hunters, never the hunted. They had never, in 3,000 years of conquest, been attacked by prey that struck upward from a position of apparent weakness. The assault began with the activation of humanity's most secret weapon, a global network of kinetic bombardment systems that had been disguised as civilian infrastructure. Every major city on Earth contained hidden launch systems built into subway tunnels, sewer systems, and underground passages. What the Karvith had dismissed as primitive human transportation networks were actually carefully camouflaged military installations. All stations, this is Chun. Execute Phase 2. Send them a message they'll understand. Across the globe, hundreds of kinetic impactors launched simultaneously from concealed positions, their trajectories calculated to strike the Carveth fleet at the exact moment when their attention was focused on the planet killers. But these weren't ordinary missiles. Each impactor carried a payload designed specifically to exploit Carveth weaknesses discovered through weeks of combat analysis. The first wave delivered electromagnetic pulse devices that interfered with the bioship's neural networks. The second wave carried biological agents designed to trigger autoimmune responses in Carveth bioarmor. The third wave contained the most devastating weapon of all, captured Carveth communication codes that had been modified to carry subliminal psychological warfare messages. War Prince Vex then watched in growing horror as his fleet's formations dissolved into chaos. Bioships began receiving contradictory orders that seemed to come from legitimate command sources. Navigation systems became unreliable as electromagnetic interference disrupted their organic computer networks. Most terrifying of all, his warriors began reporting psychological symptoms that the Carveth had no framework for understanding. "My prince," his second hunter reported, his voice trembling with something no Carveth should ever feel: terror. "The fleet's neural networks are experiencing cascade failures. Ships are breaking formation without orders. Some vessels are reporting that their crews are hearing voices." The voices were the result of Dr. Paolo Iacrona's spiritual warfare, taken to a technological level. Human scientists had analyzed the shaman's techniques and found ways to replicate them using captured Carveth biotechnology. The subliminal messages weren't just random noise. They were carefully crafted psychological attacks designed to exploit the Carveth's complete lack of experience with fear, uncertainty, and self-doubt. For a species that had never questioned their supremacy, the experience of being systematically outmaneuvered by creatures they considered inferior prey was psychologically devastating. Carveth warriors began exhibiting behaviors that had no precedent in their culture: hesitation, panic, and individual self-preservation overriding pack loyalty. But the most devastating blow to Carveth morale came from an unexpected source. Deep inside Planet Killer Omega 7, Lieutenant Sarah Kim had reached the creature's primary neural cluster. What she found there changed everything humans thought they knew about their enemy. "Command, this is Alpha Leader," she transmitted, her voice filled with amazement and horror. "The Planet Killers aren't just biomechanical weapons. They're prisoners." The neural cluster was massive, a brain the size of a building, but as Kim studied its structure, she realized it wasn't Carveth in origin. The neural pathways were too complex, the thought patterns too sophisticated. This was the brain of a previously unknown sapient species, one that had been captured and enslaved by the Carveth, its consciousness imprisoned within the biomechanical shell of a world destroyer. "My God," Kim whispered as the implications sank in. "They're using other species' minds to control their weapons. The Planet Killers are powered by enslaved consciousness." Working quickly, Kim began establishing a neural interface with the imprisoned mind. The process was dangerous, potentially fatal, but the alternative was allowing Earth to be consumed. As her consciousness touched that of the alien prisoner, she felt the weight of centuries of captivity, of forced servitude, of a brilliant mind reduced to a biological weapon. But she also felt something else: hope. The enslaved consciousness had been waiting for this moment, for contact with a free mind that could offer liberation. "Can you help us?" Kim asked through the neural link. The response came not in words, but in pure emotional communication: gratitude, determination, and an overwhelming desire for freedom. Across the solar system, similar conversations were taking place as other human strike teams made contact with the minds imprisoned within the Planet Killers. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when humanity proved that cooperation was more powerful than domination, that liberation was stronger than conquest. The enslaved consciousnesses, given the choice between serving their captors and joining their liberators, chose freedom. Planet Killer Omega 7 suddenly reversed its trajectory, turning away from Earth and toward the Carveth fleet. Its weapons systems, designed to consume worlds, began targeting the bioships that had enslaved its mind for centuries. Across the solar system, all 6 planet killers turned against their masters, their imprisoned pilots finally able to strike back at their captors. War Prince Vex then received the reports in stunned disbelief. Impossible. The planet killers cannot disobey. They are bound to our neural command codes. My prince, his strategist replied, his voice breaking with defeat. The neural command codes are being overridden by something we don't understand. The planet killers are attacking our ships. The tide of battle turned in a matter of minutes. The Karvith fleet, designed to overwhelm planetary defenses, was completely unprepared for assault by their own weapons. Bioships that had survived 3 millennia of conquest were torn apart by creatures they thought they controlled absolutely. But even as victory seemed within reach, Admiral Chen knew the real battle was just beginning. The Karvith were apex predators, and wounded predators were often the most dangerous. As their fleet began to crumble, they would likely resort to their most desperate tactics. All human forces, she broadcast across the global network, prepare for their final gambit. When a predator is cornered, it becomes most dangerous. They're going to try to take us with them. The warning proved prophetic. As his empire collapsed around him, War Prince Vex then made the decision that would either restore Karvith supremacy or ensure their complete destruction. He activated the fleet's ultimate weapon, a biovirus designed to consume all organic matter in a solar system, turning every living thing into raw material for Karvith reproduction. If we cannot have this world, he declared, no one can. But, in his desperation, Vex then had forgotten the most important lesson of the war. Humans were not like other species. They didn't surrender when faced with extinction. They adapted. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's analysis of Karvith biology had revealed more than just their genetic rigidity. It had shown that their bioviruses, like all their weapons, were designed for specific target species. They could consume silicon-based life, energy beings, or any number of other biological forms, but they had never encountered a species like humanity. Humans were biological mutts, the result of millions of years of genetic mixing, adaptation, and evolution in diverse environments. Their DNA contained elements from every form of life on Earth, from bacteria to mammals, from deep-sea organisms to Arctic survivors. They were, in essence, a biological amalgamation that represented the entire diversity of Earth's biosphere. When the Karvith biovirus attempted to consume human tissue, it encountered something unprecedented, a genetic code so diverse and adaptable that it couldn't be processed. Instead of breaking down human DNA, the virus began incorporating human genetic elements into its own structure. Within hours, it had evolved beyond Karvith control, becoming something entirely new. The virus that was meant to consume Earth instead began consuming the Karvith fleet. Their bioships, designed to be perfect biological organisms, had no defense against a pathogen that could adapt faster than they could respond. Ship after ship fell silent as their crews succumbed to their own weapon turned against them. War Prince Vex then watched his empire die from the command center of his flagship. Around him, his officers showed symptoms of infection as the evolved virus spread through the ship's biological systems. For the first time in Karvith history, they were experiencing what their prey had always faced, the terror of being hunted by something they couldn't defeat. Second Hunter, he called to his subordinate, who was struggling to maintain consciousness as the virus attacked his nervous system. Send a message to the Dominion. Tell them that we have found a species that hunts the hunters. The flagship's communication systems failed before the message could be sent. In the depths of space, the greatest predatory empire in galactic history fell silent, consumed by their own ultimate weapon turned against them by a species they had dismissed as insignificant prey. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chun stood in her command bunker, watching the last Karvith bioship go dark on her tactical display. Around her, officers cheered and embraced, celebrating humanity's impossible victory. But Chun knew that this was more than just a military triumph. It was proof of something that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had faced extinction and responded not with resignation or despair, but with adaptation, cooperation, and an absolute refusal to submit. They had turned their greatest weaknesses into strengths, their diversity into unity, their compassion into a weapon more powerful than any technology. Admiral, Colonel Roberts approached with a communication tablet. We're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Word of our victory is spreading. There are dozens of species that survive Carveth attacks, but went into hiding. They're asking if Earth would be willing to help them rebuild. Sarah looked out at the stars visible through the bunker's reinforced windows. Somewhere out, there were civilizations that had been hiding in fear, species that had given up hope, beings who had accepted that predators would always triumph over prey. But Earth had proven that assumption wrong. So in response to all of them, she said quietly, "Tell them that humanity stands ready to help any species that chooses cooperation over domination, adaptation over conquest. Tell them that the age of apex predators is over. And if other predator species challenge us." Sarah Chun smiled, and in that smile was the accumulated wisdom of a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on a world where everything was trying to kill everything else, a species that had learned to turn every disadvantage into an advantage, every weakness into strength. Then, they'll learn what every Carveth warrior learned in their final moments, she said. When humans decide to hunt something, we don't stop until it's extinct. The war was over, but the legend was just beginning. Across the galaxy, the story would be told of the day the prey became predators, the weak became strong, and a species of hairless apes from a small blue world proved that the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't the creature with the biggest claws or the strongest armor. It's the creature that refuses to give up. Years later, when xenobiologists studied the remains of the Carveth fleet, they would find evidence of something unprecedented in galactic history. In the final moments of their existence, as their own weapon consumed them, the Carveth had begun to evolve. For the first time in millennia, genetic diversity had started to appear in their species. They had begun, too late, to develop the adaptability that had made humanity supreme. The greatest irony of the war was that in trying to destroy humanity, the Carveth had finally encountered a force that could have taught them how to become more than perfect predators. They could have learned to become survivors. But predators, by their very nature, cannot change what they are. Humans can.